Hey, what is good, everybody? This is part 3 of my 5-part series, The Top 5 Best Free Synths. And today, we're going to be talking about Lokomotiv. Lokomotiv is an emulation of an old school 70s analog synth. This thing is just magical. It sounds great. If I had to do a desert island situation where I could only take 10 plugins, Lokomotiv would definitely be one of them. It just has this amazing trebly high end. It's very airy without being harsh. And before I ramble too much, let's just take a listen to this thing. The first thing I'm going to do is go to Import Bank, and I'm going to pull up my preset bank, Wick-it Locomotive Bank. Also, before I get started, I wanted to add that there's no built-in effects in Lokomotiv. There's no reverb or delay, and I don't have any effects on it right now. So some of these patches are going to sound like there's reverb or delay, and I'm going to explain that in a minute. But for now, let's take a listen. All right, folks, this is Lokomotiv by Archetype Instruments, and as you can see, it's pretty bare bones. There's not a whole lot of parameters, and that's what makes this thing so amazing. I didn't really get into synthesizers until about 2009. The first thing I had was Massive, the software, and Massive is pretty complicated. And then shortly after that, I got Serum, so I went into Serum too, not really understanding the basics. So not only do I love Lokomotiv, but learning how many different kinds of sounds I can make on something as simple as this really helped me see the big picture. And then when I got back into more complicated programs like Serum or Massive or whatever, it really not only made me understand how powerful the basics are, but it also made me appreciate all the extra things they can do too. So let's start right down here. These are the 4 sound sources. First, you have a sub oscillator, and then right above it, there's the sub shaper. We have a saw wave, saw detune, next you have a pulse, and then right above that is the pulse width. And then right here you just have a really simple noise generator. Now this hard sync only affects the pulse and the saw. You can get some really nasty sounds with this. Let's come over here where it says control. You can automate your mod wheel. You can set it to LFO cutoff or this hard sync, and then here's the cutoff. It's really important to note, if you are not using a mod wheel, to make sure you turn it off, because if your mod wheel is set to LFO and you don't have one, it's going to disable this LFO and you're going to be sitting there wondering why this thing doesn't work. So if you do not have a mod wheel, make sure this is set to off. Here's just your simple polyphonic, monophonic, and legato. Here's your portamento, which sounds like this. Kind of scoops into the note. Over here is your filter, and you've got a low pass, high pass, and band pass. And you have your cutoff, your resonance. You have key tracking, which key tracking means different things in different synths. And being that this is an old school emulation, it's really just sort of a fine tuner of the range between this cutoff and the envelope. Right here we have drive, pre, and post. And Locomotive has a limiter built into it, because if you look at my output right here on Ableton, if I crank this thing, it never clips. Same with the post. This drive really helps with bass patches, because sometimes a sub sound or a bassy sound, a little bit of drive will really give it some beef. Right here where it says amp, you can put it in envelope or gate mode. And this works with this envelope here. And this is your basic attack, decay, sustain, and release. These work with the filter too, as well as the amplitude or volume. So when you put an attack on something, it's not only slowly raising the volume up, it's also slowly opening this cutoff filter. And the same works for the release. You can hear when I let off the note that not only does the volume fade, but that cutoff filter also starts to close again. Now I wanted to show you something really cool about the curves on this attack and release. First, I'm going to turn this cutoff all the way up because I don't want the filter to be doing anything right now. So right now, if I just tap a really short note, only the volume is fading away because the cutoff isn't doing anything. So this right here is the audio of what you just heard, this note. And this curve is the volume fading away, and it's got this nice little curve to it. Most synths, digital synths, like this is Serum, and this is the exact same thing on Serum, you'll notice this perfect digital fadeaway. The thing I love about Locomotive is they paid so much attention to the detail in analog synth behavior that their release is actually doing this sort of like imperfect curve. That just gives it a different sound. If I go back in Locomotive and I turn this cutoff down, now if I tap the same quick note, not only is the volume fading away, but that filter's closing off too. And this right here is what that looks like. And just look how kind of weird and imperfect this curve is. That's part of what gives it the sound. And that's why some of the patches in Locomotive sound like they have reverb. They just have really cool analog filters on these attack and releases right here, and it just makes such a cool sound. Let's move on over to the LFO. You can assign it to either the filter, which will be this cutoff right here, or you can assign it to the pulse width, which will be right here. You can assign it to the amplitude, which is just the overall volume, and you can assign it to this hard sync knob right here. Your waveform shapes are sine, ramp, square, random, and then you have a sine one shot and a ramp one shot. Let's start right here. Let's start with sine. Let's assign this to the filter over here. And when this speed is all the way down and this amount is right here at 0, it's not doing anything. Also, when you do move these, if you double click on them, they'll go back to 0. That goes for anything in Locomotive. If you double click it, it'll take it right back to where the initial patch would default to. That's really convenient sometimes. So let's turn this amount up and this speed up. Next, I want to pull up a couple specific presets and we can kind of learn from them a little bit. Like this one, for instance, it sounds like it has delay. But if you look here, you'll see it has the waveform set to ramp, and that ramp is going to this hard sync knob right here. So what it's doing, you can turn the speed up. It's really just pushing this back and forth really fast. So that sounds like a delay. let's go to this Nintendo lead. And right here we have the waveform set to square, and then we have the destination set to the master pitch. So yeah, sounds like Nintendo and stuff. Let's pull up this bass patch. Now this is cool right here. If I hit a note and release, it trails away. But if I hit a note and press it all the way down, it stops. And that's because of your decay and release relationship right here. You see this decay is down really low and the sustain is all the way down. So if you hold a note down, it's running from here down to nothing and then stopping. But if it's somewhere in between this delay and the sustain and you let off the note, then this release activates. So if you barely tap the note really short, the release activates. But if I push a note and I hold it down, it goes from this much decay down to 0 sustain. So you can play this patch really expressively.